Good evening, my dear listener. Settle in as you relax and listen to the stories we have ahead of us. Whether you're wrapped in a blanket beneath a quiet sky or walking softly through a dusk-lit room, let this be your passage to another world. One cobbled with ancient stones and echoing with the voices of centuries past. Tonight, we walk the time-worn streets of ancient Rome, not the marble Rome of emperors and triumphs, but the Rome of strange delights, curious customs, and unforgettable oddities. For all its glory, this empire also held peculiar truths that flicker like candlelight in forgotten corners. We'll visit kitchens scented with honey-roasted dormice, and bathhouses where strangers sat side by side in communal contemplation. We'll whisper of flamingo tongues served on silver platters, and of laundresses who made their living with buckets of fwell. You'll see soon enough. Picture the scene. The sun has just dipped below the 7 hills, casting a soft golden glow over crumbling columns and terracotta rooftops. The streets are alive with evening chatter, merchants packing up their stalls, children chasing one another, past open doorways, and the scent of spiced wine drifting from a tavern's hearth. Somewhere, a lyre is being gently plucked. The city is winding down, but the stories are just beginning. Now, imagine yourself walking down the Via Appia sandals, brushing against the dusty stones, your eyes wide with wonder. To your left, a bakery still hums with warmth as the last round loaves are drawn from the oven. To your right, a humble insula, an apartment block where laughter and argument rise in equal measure from open windows. Rome is many things at once. Majestic and mundane, sacred and profane, grandiose and grotesque. Asterisk, we often remember the legions, the conquests, the marble statues that gaze forever into the horizon. But what of the soft underbelly of Roman life? The daily rituals and eccentric choices that made this empire not only powerful, but peculiarly human. The Romans, you'll find, were masters of contradiction, lovers of beauty, prone to extravagance, at times deeply practical, and at others completely absurd. Take, for instance, their passion for feasting. A Roman banquet was more than a meal. It was a performance. Guests reclined on cushioned couches, wine flowed like water, and entertainment might range from poetry recitations to dancers in peacock feathers. But amidst the opulence, you might also find something small and furry on your plate. A delicacy, they'd say. A roasted dormouse, stuffed with minced pork, herbs, and honey. Quite the treat for a noble palate. Strange, certainly, yet it tells us volumes about class, culinary bravado, and the Roman spirit of indulgence. And what of cleanliness? The Romans were remarkably advanced in their bath culture, with sprawling complexes offering warm, hot, and cold pools, steam rooms, and even libraries. But as we'll discover, their sense of hygiene didn't quite align with modern sensibilities. Communal latrines, for instance, offered no privacy, and instead of toilet paper, a shared sponge on a stick, rinsed in vinegar water. It was an era where sophistication and squeamishness danced hand in hand. These tales may sound peculiar, even laughable, but they are precious glimpses into the humanity of a people who lived, loved, and laughed 2,000 years ago. They remind us that history is not only written in stone and scrolls, but whispered in kitchens, echoed in alleyways, and tucked into the folds of everyday life. As we wander through these chapters tonight, we'll meet a host of Roman souls, noblemen and slaves, priestesses and perfumers, children and gladiators. Their stories will carry us through laughter and reverence, astonishment and quiet reflection. For each curious fact we encounter, there lies a deeper truth beneath. A lesson about desire, fear, community, or the enduring ache to be remembered. And so, gentle traveler, if your heart is ready, let the world outside grow quiet for a time. Let the flicker of a lantern or the rustle of wind against your window become part of our ancient setting. Let your imagination paint mosaic floors and marble baths, bustling markets and sacred temples. Let us walk together through the ordinary and extraordinary alike. This is not just a journey through history. It is a walk through the soul of a civilization, one strange custom at a time. Are you ready? Then take my hand and step lightly with me into the streets of Rome. Our first stop lies just ahead in the lavish dining room of a Roman noble, where laughter echoes, candles glow, and a tiny creature, plump and roasted, awaits on a silver dish. Asterisk. The lamps are lit, casting golden halos along the polished marble floors of the triclinium. It is Numidian marble, a rich, buttery yellow veined with streaks of amber, imported at staggering expense from the quarries of Africa. Its surface is so immaculately polished that it reflects the flickering lamp flames like a placid, subterranean lake. A gentle murmur of anticipation, a sound like the rustling of expensive silks, weaves through this grand Roman dining room. Here, guests recline upon 3 immense couches, or lecti, arranged in a graceful horseshoe around a central mosaic table. The couches themselves are works of art, their frames carved from citron wood and inlaid with shimmering tortoiseshell, their cushions stuffed with the finest goose down and draped in Tyrian purple cloth, a color so rare it is said to be worth more than its weight in gold. Slaves, chosen for their grace and youth, move with a silence born of rigorous training. They wear simple white tunics, a stark contrast to the vibrant colors of the guests, and their feet are bare against the cool stone. They move between the couches, bearing platters of hors d'oeuvres that glisten under the lamplight. Olives from Baetica, glistening with herbaceous oil, delicate morsels of sows udder, and tiny, salted fish from the Black Sea. Tonight's feast is a grand affair, the culmination of a bountiful harvest and the emperor's recent favor. It is an intricate performance of power, a symphony of wealth displayed not through speeches or decrees, but through the universal language of cuisine at the center of it all. Occupying the lectus medius, the couch of honor, is our host, Lucius Cornelius Maximus. He is a senator of an old and respected family, yet he possesses the restless ambition of a novus homo, a new man. He has a fondness for novelty and a deep-seated fear of being considered old-fashioned. His toga is impeccably white, its purple stripe the latest clavus, a declaration of his senatorial rank. His hair is artfully arranged, perfumed with spikenard, and his fingers, resting upon a silk cushion, are adorned with a heavy gold ring bearing the seal of his ancestors. His villa, a sprawling complex of courtyards and colonnades, sits atop the fashionable Aventine Hill. From its grand terrace, one can see the city of Rome spread out like a jeweled tapestry. The silver ribbon of the Tiber glints in the twilight, and beyond it, the shadowy bulk of the Palatine Hill rises, dotted with the opulent palaces of the city's most powerful men. But tonight, no one's eyes are on the river or the distant hills. They are fixed upon the kitchen doors. A hush falls over the room as 2 slaves emerge, their movements synchronized and solemn. They carry a single, magnificent silver tray, chased with images of Diana hunting in the forest. The tray is carried with the reverence usually reserved for sacred relics being paraded through the forum. On the tray, Nestled in a bed of freshly picked fig leaves are a dozen plump dormice. Their golden skins are crisped to a perfect, crackling sheen, having been meticulously stuffed with a delicate and fragrant mixture of minced pork, finely ground pepper from the east, crushed pine, nuts, and a whisper of laser, a pungent, now extinct spice. The entire creation is then drizzled with sweet hymettus honey, which pools in tiny amber droplets on the silver. Each tiny creature is curled into a posture of sleep, their minuscule paws tucked beneath their chins. They seem almost peaceful, as if napping, if one could for a moment ignore the intoxicating scent of roasted spice and caramelized sweetness that wafts through the room. This is no trick of poverty, no rustic meal for a commoner. These dormice are a delicacy of the highest order, an edible jewel beloved by the elite. They are not captured from the wild but bred for the table in special terracotta pots called glararia. These clay enclosures are a world unto themselves, dark and cool, with small air holes and tiny carved ledges for the creatures to climb. Within this controlled environment, they are fattened on a rich diet of walnuts, chestnuts, and acorns. Their lives are long. Sleepy stupor designed for a single purpose, the perfect flavor. To serve dormice is not simply to feed one's guests, is to impress, to dazzle, to state without words one's sophistication and one's place among Rome's most cultivated class. It is a gesture that says, I control nature itself for my pleasure. Lucius smiles, a slow, satisfied spreading of his lips, as his guests murmur their collective delight. He catches the eye of his wife, Cornelia, who reclines opposite him, offering a slight, approving nod. The poet Aulus, a man whose patrons keep him in fine wine and clean togas, leans forward, his eyes wide. He compares the glistening morsels to the mythic ambrosia of the gods, a taste so divine it could make a mortal immortal. The General Quintus, a gruff, sun-weathered man whose hands are more accustomed to a sword hilt than a dining couch, jests, in his booming voice, that he would trade 3 troublesome provinces in Gaul for a single bite of such a masterpiece. A wealthy merchant, newly elevated to the equestrian class, watches the others carefully, his face a mask of studied appreciation, determined not to betray his more humble origins. And then they eat. With reverence and a hushed appetite, they use small, 2-pronged silver forks to lift the dormice from their leafy beds. There is a delicate crackle as the skin gives way, revealing the succulent, rich meat within. They lick the sweet, sticky honey from their fingers without a trace of embarrassment, their eyes closing in gustatory pleasure. The room is filled with soft sounds of appreciation, a testament to the kitchen's triumph. Let us pause for a moment and peer with our mind's eye into the kitchen from which this culinary marvel emerged. It is a world away from the serene elegance of the triclinium. Here, it is a cavern of heat, steam, and controlled chaos. A great fire glows with volcanic intensity beneath a bronze brazier, its heat radiating through the stone-flagged room. A young cook named Marcus, his brow slick with sweat that stings his eyes, frantically stirs a pan of honey and Falernian wine reduction, a sauce for the next course of roasted boar. Beside him, the head chef, an older, sterner Gaul named Gaius, who was once a slave but earned his freedom through his culinary genius, inspects the next batch of dormice before they are sent out. He prods one with a calloused finger, his face a mask of intense concentration. The recipe, taken from the legendary cookbook of Apicius, is precise to the point of obsession. Every peppercorn counted, every gram of pork weighed. The kitchen, is a crucible where lavish ingredients are transmuted by fire and skill into symbols of decadence. But the dormouse, a humble, nocturnal creature in the wild, is utterly transformed in this room. Plucked from its cozy nest, woven of grass and leaves among the roots of oak and beech trees, it becomes royalty on a platter. The glorarium, its specially designed prison, is a marvel of Roman pragmatism. With its small air holes and carved climbing ledges, it ensures the animal is well fed and, crucially, immobile, preventing it from burning off the fat that makes it so desirable. The Romans admired this peculiar and absolute control over nature. It was a testament to their engineering prowess, applied not just to aqueducts and bridges, but to the very minutiae of gastronomy. Back in the dining room, the feast continues, wave after wave of culinary extravagance. Sea urchins are followed by flamingo tongues, which are in turn followed by a great wild boar, roasted whole and presented with a garland of herbs, its tusks still fearsome. Conversations bloom over platters of fresh figs, dates from Jericho, and wheels of cheese smoked over applewood. A lyrist, a young Greek with melancholic eyes, begins a soft, plaintive song that winds through the conversations like a gentle stream. Yet it's the memory of the dormouse that draws the guests back, again and again, as they marvel at the odd, exquisite pleasure of it. Aulus, his tongue loosened by several cups of wine, begins composing verses in its honor, his voice a low hum. Amidst the chatter, "O tiny morsel, jewel of the feast," he murmurs, a sleeping god upon a leafy nest. Lucius, his cheeks flushed with wine and success, claps his hands for attention and grandly declares a plan to import 100 more of the finest breeding stock from Etruria, where the creatures are said to grow fattest. Miles away, in the rolling countryside, a farmer named Crixus inspects the clay walls of his grain store by the light of a sputtering oil lamp. He finds a tiny hole, freshly gnawed, and mutters a curse about the pests that plague his livelihood. He traps dormice not to eat, but to protect his precious stores of wheat and barley. He sets a simple wooden trap near the hole, his movements weary and practical. In his small adjacent cottage, his young daughter, Gaia, secretly keeps a baby dormouse she found abandoned in the woods. She has fashioned a cage for it from reeds and moss, and she feeds it stolen acorns and whispers its name, Livia, into the darkness. To her, this creature is not a pest or a delicacy. It is a friend, a tiny, breathing secret. This is the dual life of the dormouser, culinary delight in the city and a destructive nuisance in the country, a toy for a child and a treasure for a senator. Even in its roasted, honey-glazed death, it is part of something far larger than itself, the complex, often contradictory Roman vision of control, excess, and glorious celebration. And so, as the candles burn low, their wicks drowning in pools of scented oil, and as the poet's verses turn drowsy and nonsensical, we too shall take our leave of Lucius' magnificent banquet. We step softly past the marble columns, past a slave dozing against a wall, and into the cooler, cleaner air beyond the villa walls. The scent of jasmine and night-blooming flowers hangs heavy in the garden. The dormouse remains with us not just as a lingering taste on the palate, but in spirit. It whispers of a world that found wonder in the miniature, status in the strange, and art in the act of consumption. So, dear listener, if ever you find yourself startled by the strangeness of history, let the Roman dormouse remind you there is often wisdom in the weird and an undeniable beauty in the bizarre. Our path continues now, winding onward and downward into the steam and stone of one of Rome's most communal and most surprising of customs. But first, sip your wine. Wipe the last of the honey from your hands. The next tale is not quite so appetizing. ... Asterisk. Let us now descend, dear listener, from the perfumed, rarefied air of the banquet halls to a place less often sung about in odes and poetry, yet arguably more central to the daily life of the average Roman: the public latrine. We leave the Aventine Hill behind and make our way through the crowded, noisy streets of the Subura, the city's most vibrant and densely populated quarter. The air here is thick with the smells of baking bread, cheap wine, and the sweat of a million lives lived in close proximity, in the heart of every bustling Roman neighborhood, tucked between temples dedicated to minor gods and smoky tabernae selling roasted chickpeas. There was likely a public toileter, fork open to all free citizens who could afford the small entrance fee. These communal latrines were not hidden, away in shame, but were often proud structures, marvels of civic practicality and hydraulic engineering, but also, surprisingly, of social interaction. Picture a spacious, well-lit room, often rectangular or semicircular in shape. Along the walls run long benches of cool marble or smooth stone, each perforated with a series of neatly carved keyhole-shaped openings set a comfortable distance apart. There are no stalls, no doors, no flimsy partitions to grant the illusion of solitude. There is just people, side by side, their trousers or tunics hitched up around their knees, attending to nature's most fundamental requirement while discussing the price of grain, the latest political scandal, or the thrilling performance of the Greens against the Blues in last night's chariot race at the Circus Maximus. Beneath their feet, a small channel of water flows constantly in front of the bench, used for rinsing hands or the cleaning implements. And beneath the bench itself, a much larger, deeper channel of continuously flowing water, diverted from one of Rome's mighty aqueducts, rushes along, carrying all waste away into the city's gargantuan sewer system. Yes, it was here, on these surprisingly elegant marble seats, that many Romans conducted a surprising amount of their daily business, and not only of the bodily kind. Senators, their fine togas carefully gathered to avoid the floor, might be seen sounding out public opinion on a new tax. Merchants could be overheard finalizing a deal for a shipment of Spanish olive oil. Soldiers on leave might exchange stories of distant campaigns, their voices echoing off the high vaulted ceilings. Bakers, lawyers, and craftsmen alike shared this space without shame or awkwardness. To a Roman, the act of relieving oneself was not shrouded in the deep veil of privacy, as it is today. It was simply another public rhythm of life, like bathing or marketing, and sometimes even a welcome venue for camaraderie and news. A boy, perhaps 10 years old, his face smudged with dirt, runs in to fetch his grandfather, who is late for their midday meal. The old man, a retired legionary with a web of scars on his forearms, lingers on his seat. He is recounting, with much dramatic gesturing, a story to his neighbor about a famously dishonest merchant who sold wine so sour that even the gods on Olympus would spit it out. A ripple of hearty laughter fills the air, mingling with the more pungent, earthy aromas of the space and the faint, clean smell of wet stone. It is earthy and real and utterly unfiltered. This is Rome, not as it was carved into triumphal arches, but as it was lived. And then there was the infamous Tesorium. After finishing one's business, a Roman would reach for this humble but essential tool. It consisted of a natural sea sponge, prized for its softness and absorbency, attached to the end of a simple wooden stick. These implements were kept in a basin or a trough of constantly running water, often with vinegar or salt added as a mild disinfectant. It was communal, shared, used by dozens, perhaps hundreds, of people throughout the day before being rinsed and returned to the trough. It is a concept that might make our modern, sanitized minds recoil in horror, yet to them it was entirely ordinary. A simple and practical solution to a universal problem. The wealthier, more fastidious Roman might send a slave ahead with a private, personalized tersorium, but for the average citizen, sharing was the norm. Some latrines were not merely functional but were elaborately decorated, a sign of civic pride or the generosity of a wealthy patron. The floors might be covered in intricate mosaics of geometric patterns or marine life. In Ostia, the old port town of Rome, one can still find the remnants of such places. The tiles on the floor show lively dolphins and mythical sea creatures dancing around the feet of long-gone patrons. The walls might be plastered and painted with frescoes of garden scenes or mythological figures. The goddess Fortuna was a popular subject, a hopeful nod to good fortune in all of life's endeavors. It was not shameful to be here. It was simply life, and life, the Romans believed, should be surrounded by beauty wherever possible. Yet not everyone viewed this communal setup with unreserved fondness. In the shadowed corners of satire and witty epigrams, one finds complaints and jokes about the experience. The poet Martial, who lived in a third-floor apartment, famously complained of the constant noise from the city below, including the boisterous conversations rising from the local Phryca. Plautus, the great comic playwright, makes sport of the tersorium in his Seas. A man, he writes, who conveniently forgets his debts is worse than one who neglects to rinse the sponge after user. Truly damning comparison in the Roman mind. These jokes reveal the anxieties lurking beneath the surface of this enforced intimacy. Fears of contamination, annoyance at a neighbor's lack of consideration, and the simple human desire for a moment's peace. Among the wealthier class, private latrines did exist within their sprawling homes, or these were more secluded, often just a single seat, tucked away in a small, discreet room near the kitchen or garden. Here, servants were tasked with cleaning and maintaining the facility, ensuring a fresh sponge and a clean pot were always available. If the latrine wasn't connected to the main sewer, but even in these grand villas, the fundamental design was often not so different. Functionality, not finery, governed the Roman toilet. The engineering that underpinned it all, however, was truly remarkable. Many public latrines were strategically built over branches of Rome's vast and ancient sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima. This greatest sewer, originally an open canal built in the Age of Kings, had been covered over and expanded into a subterranean network of such scale and durability that parts of it are still in use today. Water from the aqueducts flowed constantly beneath the seats, a triumph of hydraulic planning that kept things moving and relatively clean, washing waste away towards the Tiber. Imagine, if you will, a young woman named Livia, shopkeeper's daughter, not unlike the girl with the pet dormouse sitting with her friend in the relative quiet of the women's section of the latrine in the early morning light. The market hasn't opened yet, and this moment of shared stillness is a rare lull in their busy day. Their soft laughter rises over the constant, murmuring gurgle of the stream below. Livia holds a small bouquet of herbs, lavender and mint to her nose, a simple, fragrant shield against the lingering smells. a small act of personal refinement in a public space. They speak in low tones of a handsome soldier they saw in the Forum, of the rising price of linen, of dreams and small worries. In this single intimate moment, we see the heart of Roman resilience and adaptability. Even in a place that most of us would consider fundamentally unpleasant, there is the potential for grace. There is routine. There is the simple, profound warmth of shared human experience. So, let us not turn away too quickly from this seemingly crude aspect of Roman life. The Roman toilet, in all its humble dignity, was a place of invention, interaction, and even community. It reminds us that history is not always found in imperial scrolls and monumental sculptures, but sometimes in the soft scrape of sandals on stone, the shared laughter of friends, and the murmur of everyday voices, side by side, over a sponge on a stick. And if we listen closely, dear listener, perhaps we can hear more than just casual conversation echoing off the stone. Perhaps we can hear the very pulse of the city, the anxious laughter of a young man trying to impress an older merchant, the quiet sob of a recent widow who finds fleeting companionship among familiar faces, the rich melody of 100 daily dramas rising over the ever-flowing stream beneath their feet. Yes, in this strange and intimate corner of Rome, dignity was not lost, but redefined. It was found not in solitude, but in the shared, unvarnished reality of being human. And perhaps that is one of history's greatest gifts, to remind us that even in the most peculiar and unlikely of places, we find pieces of ourselves. We find people with all their quirks and rituals, building something lasting. Connection. Let us now carry this unexpected warmth with us as we rise and ascend once more into the light. The air around us grows humid, heavy with moisture. The scent of eucalyptus, rosemary, and rosewater begins to beckon, overriding the fainter smells of the street. Ahead lies the grand arched entrance to the Thermae, the magnificent Roman baths. Our journey continues. Step into the Thermae, dear listener, and let the world outside fall away. Take a deep breath. The air here is different, thick with moisture, warm against your skin, carrying the faint, clean scent of heated stone and aromatic oils. The clamor of the Roman street, the rumble of cartwheels, the shouts of vendors, the endless river of footfalls fades into a distant memory. Here, within high-vaulted halls of stone, the very heartbeat of Roman leisure echoes in steamy breath and splashing water. The bathhouse is more than a place to wash, much more. It is a microcosm of the empire itself, sprawling, multifaceted. Institution that is at once a gymnasium, a social club, a library, a gallery, and a sanctuary. It is a place of rituals, of power and parity, where senators, draped in simple linen, might sit beside slaves enjoying a rare day of rest, and where sharp-tongued philosophers, seeking inspiration in the haze, share space with grizzled soldiers, their battle scars softened by the mist. It is where bodies were cleansed and minds relaxed, where business deals were sealed with a handshake, and where gossip flowed as freely as the warm water that gurgled ceaselessly through a hidden labyrinth of copper pipes. Upon entering, we find ourselves in the grand vestibule, a space designed to impress and to transition us from the mundane world to this realm of leisure. And from here, we pass into the apoditerium, the changing room. The transition is immediate. The noise level rises, but it is a pleasant, human sounder, symphony of murmurs, laughter, and greetings. A magnificent mosaic floor unfolds beneath our feet, depicting a riot of marine life. Dolphins, their bodies arched in impossible grace, frolic through stylized waves of blue and green tessery. They chase silver-scaled fish and are pursued in turn by a playful octopus, its tentacles a swirl of intricate patterns. It is a beautiful and deliberate nod to the cleansing ritual to come, a promise of water and renewal. Wooden cubbies, or loculi, line the polished plaster walls, each with a small painted number. The air hums with the rustle of coarse wool and fine linen togas being shed, the soft slap of leather sandals on stone, and the low, continuous murmur of conversation. A young man, perhaps no older than 17, and new to the city's rhythms, nervously hands his dusty sandals to a slave attendant, whose face remains a mask of practiced indifference. He clutches his clean loincloth, glancing shyly at an older man, a senator by his bearing, who speaks animatedly to a companion about a contentious Senate debate over grain subsidies. The senator's voice is full of authority even here, but in his unadorned state, he is stripped of his usual pomp. Nearby, two merchants haggle in hushed tones over the price of Spanish olive oil, their words punctuated by the sharp clap of a locker door. Here, status is temporarily suspended, though never entirely forgotten. From this bustling antechamber, the true journey begins. Bathers, now clad only in simple wraps or in their own skin, move through the sacred sequence, a carefully orchestrated progression of temperatures designed to open the pores and calm the mind. First, the tepid rim. This is the great, warm heart of the bath complex. The air is balmy, heated from below by the ingenious hypercaust system, a hidden world of brick pillars and hot air channels that turns the very floor into a gentle radiator. This is a room for lingering, for acclimating, for conversation. Bathers recline on marble benches that line the walls, their bodies gleaming with a light sheen of perspiration. The acoustics are superb. The vaulted ceiling captures and softens every voice, creating a constant, pleasant drone. Here, a philosopher, his brow furrowed in thought, argues that bathing too often weakens the constitution, making a man soft. His friend, a retired legionary with a web of scars across his chest, retorts with a hearty laugh that, on the contrary, it strengthens the soul by washing away the grime of the world. When you have lingered long enough, when your body is fully attuned to the warmth, you proceed to the next chamber, the caldarium. To step inside is to be enveloped. The air is a dense, billowing cloud, thick with steam and the intoxicating scent of crushed herbs, rosemary, perhaps, or lavender dropped into the hot water basins. Visibility is limited to a few feet, creating a sense of intimacy and seclusion. Even in a crowded room, the heat here is profound. It seeps into your bones, unknots tired muscles, and softens the skin in preparation for the most vital part of the cleaning ritual. Along the sides of the caldarium are alcoves where slaves, often specialists in their craft, wield their jewels. These are curved bronze or iron scrapers, instruments of purification. After a bather has been anointed with fragrant olive oil, the attendant begins his work. The scrape of the strigil against oiled skin is a rhythmic, almost meditative sound. A steady hiss-scrape that rises above the murmur of the room. It is a surprisingly vigorous process, removing not just the oil but also sweat, dust, and dead skin, leaving the body scraped clean and glowing. We see a wealthy merchant, his eyes closed in blissful repose, being attended by 3 slaves at once. One anoints him with oil, another wields the strigil with expert strokes, and a third gently fans him with a palm frond. Conversations weave around us, fragmented and dreamlike in the steam, a snippet about trade routes to Britannia, a whispered line of poetry from Catullus, the latest news from the distant provinces of Syria, after the intense heat of the Caldarium. The final stage of the sequence awaits a test of fortitude and a jolt to the senses. The frigidarium, the cold plunge, waits at the end of the journey. This is often the grandest room of all, with a high ceiling open to the sky or covered by a magnificent dome. At its center lies a deep, marble-lined pool of unheated water, its surface clear and shockingly still. To step into it is to experience a bracing, electric shock that sends gooseflesh rippling down your arms and steals your breath for a moment. Laughter almost always erupts here, loud and bright, as bathers gasp and flail from the invigorating chill. The shock closes the pores, tightens the skin, and leaves one feeling reborn, alert, and intensely alive. Children, immune to the shock, splash with abandon in a shallower section, their shrieks of joy echoing off the marble walls and polished statues of Neptune and his Nereids. But the Thermae is also a place of business and culture, a city within a city. In quieter, secluded corners, deals are brokered in whispers that curl and vanish like the steam. A marriage contract is negotiated between two fathers, their conversation a careful dance of dowries and political advantage. Love letters penned on small wooden tablets coated with wax are passed discreetly from a matron's handmaiden to a young centurion's attendant. Over by a sunlit window, an artist, a certain Lucius, sketches ideas for a patron's new villa mural. He is not just drawing figures, he is trying to capture the elusive quality of the light, the way it filters through the steam and turns the mist to liquid gold. He holds his wax tablet close, shielding it from the ambient moisture, his stylus moving with fluid certainty. Elsewhere, the sounds of commerce and leisure continue. A tonsure, or barber, has set up his chair, and the snip of his shears provides a counter-rhythm to the splashing water. Men get a clean shave, a trim of the beard, and even have unsightly hairs plucked from their noses, their yelps of pain adding another note to the bathhouse symphony. In another hall, a library offers scrolls of history and poetry to a more literate clientele who read reclining on benches, their minds as engaged as their bodies are relaxed. In yet another corner, the clatter of dice on a stone board signals a game of chance, with small piles of coins changing hands with every throw. Even the architecture whispers a story of elegance and engineering prowess. The vaulted ceilings, a masterpiece of Roman concrete, are not merely beautiful. They are functional, designed to collect condensation and channel it down the walls so that it does not drip on the bathers below. They carry sound like a sacred amphora, amplifying it in some spaces and muting it in others. Sunlight, when it pierces the steam, filters through thin sheets of alabaster or panes of selenite set into the high windows, bathing the interior in a soft, ethereal glow. The walls themselves are canvases, bearing magnificent frescoes of mythological scenes. Nereids, riding sea monsters, Diana at her bath, the triumphs of Hercules. Their painted forms, already idealized, are softened further by the heat and moisture, making them seem to dreamlike and alive. And yet, for all this splendor, for all the complexity and scale, there is a fundamental simplicity at its core. This is a public ritual, an equalizer. The entrance fee is nominal of fun, just a single quadrans, the smallest Roman coin making, it accessible to nearly everyone. For a few hours, the rigid hierarchies of Roman society become blurred. It is a place, where the emperor and the baker might both soak in the same communal warmth, where the sweat of a senator mingles with that of a stonemason in the steam, and where both emerge for a brief, transcendent moment, simply and profoundly human, as the day wanes and the sun lowers itself behind the rooftops of the city, casting long golden rays through the high windows. The baths begin to empty. The boisterous energy of midday softens into a quiet, contented hum. Attendants move with practiced efficiency, sweeping great arcs of water from the tiled floors toward the drains, their brooms making a soft, sloshing sound. The last stragglers linger in the warm glow of newly lit oil lamps, their voices hushed. Reluctant to leave this haven of warmth and camaraderie, we step back out through the grand entrance, into the cool evening air. Our skin tingles, our minds are clear, our spirits feel renewed. Rome hums around us, more vivid now, more intimate. The city, which a few hours ago was a chaotic abstraction, now feels like a neighborhood. Through the simple, daily rituals of bathhouse steam and toilet stone, we've glimpsed its very heartbeat, and there is still more to see, more to uncover. Shall we continue, dear traveler? The evening is young, and the streets of Rome still whisper their secrets. Let us walk on ... now. Dear traveler, let us pass through an archway carved with the triumphant symbols of laurel wreaths and roaring lion heads, and into the very heart of Roman entertainment, the amphitheater. The air here is electric, charged with anticipation. The sheer scale is breathtaking. Row upon row of stone seats rise toward the sky, a man-made mountain teeming with life. The structure is alive with motion, a vast, restless sea of white tunics, colorful stoles, and simple brown togas. Trumpets, their bronze bells flashing in the sun, blare a piercing fanfare that echoes across the arena. The crowd, tens of thousands strong, rises as one great wave, its roar a physical force that you can feel in your chest. But as you find your place on the hard stone bench and the show below begins, take note not just of the spectacle, but of the structure that contains it. Look to the wide arched corridors, those sloped passageways that burrow deep into the substructure of the building. They are the arteries of this great stone beast, designed to funnel thousands of people in and out with an astonishing grace and speed. These are the vomitoria. The name, you must admit, sounds rather unpleasant to the modern ear. But it is named not for any act of bodily indulgence, but for its supremely efficient design. The word derives from the Latin verb voma, meaning to spew forth. These corridors do not summon revulsion, they enable motion. Like the gullet of some colossal creature, they spew forth the eager crowds into the sunlit bowl of the arena. Or, when the spectacle is done, swallow them just as quickly back into the cool shadow of the concourse. They are a triumph of crowd control, a testament to Roman pragmatism. It's a curious and enduring twist of history that this word, vomitorium, came to be so spectacularly misunderstood in later centuries. Influenced by tales of Roman excess, many came to believe it was a special room set aside for the grotesque excesses of Roman feasts, a dedicated chamber for nobles, who ate and drank until they could hold no more, only to retreat to this room, purge themselves, and return to the table to begin the cycle anew. It is an image both viscerally grotesque and strangely magnetic, the portrait of a civilization so decadent, so gluttonous, that it builds and institutionalizes chambers for its own depravity. But alas, this lurid myth is just that. The Romans had no such chamber. It is a ghost of architecture, a phantom room born from a linguistic misunderstanding and a later world's desire to see Rome as a fallen empire of unparalleled debauchery. While certain individuals, particularly the very wealthy and very indulgent, may indeed have induced vomiting to prolong the pleasures of a banquet, it was a personal choice, not an institutionalized practice. It was never enshrined in architecture. Still, the myth lingers, doesn't it? It has a certain power, and perhaps it persists for a good reason. For while the room itself is fiction, the spirit behind it is not. Roman feasts, at least among the elite, were indeed extravagant, almost theatrical affairs, and the culture of consumption of food, of power, of spectacle, was very real. The myth, though factually incorrect, captures a sliver of the truth about Rome's insatiable appetite. 2. Understand, imagine a feast in progress. We are in a triclinium, a formal dining room in a wealthy villa. The walls are covered in vibrant frescoes, perhaps depicting scenes from Greek myths or idyllic country landscapes. 3 wide couches, arranged in a U-shaped curve around low tables, exquisitely crafted from citrus wood and inlaid with ivory. The flicker of a dozen oil lamps, their fuel scented with balsam, reflects in polished silver goblets brimming with deep red Falernian wine. The air is heavy with the mingled aromas of roasting meat, exotic spices, and flowering garlands. Peacocks are served whole, roasted, and then painstakingly reassembled, their magnificent tail plumes fanned out for dramatic effect. Dishes arrive in a seemingly endless procession, each more elaborate than the last: wild boar stuffed with dates, and live thrushes that fly out when the belly is carved, jellied fish molded in the shape of dolphins, dormice, a peculiar delicacy, fattened in terracotta jars and served rolled in honey and poppy seeds. The presentation is as important as the taste. Between the elaborate courses, the entertainment is constant. A poet, commissioned for the evening, recites verses praising the host's generosity and wit. A musician, a master of the cithara, plucks a gentle melody from its strings, the sound a soft counterpoint to the lively conversation. Acrobats might tumble across the mosaic floor, or a troupe of Syrian dancers might perform with veils and finger cymbals. Laughter erupts as a tipsy senator, his garland of roses askew, attempts to juggle figs to impress a lady reclining opposite. Yet behind this carefully constructed facade of grandeur and effortless plenty lies the hidden truth of immense labor. In the sweltering kitchens, a small army of slaves works tirelessly, their movements frantic and precise, terrified of making an error that would anger the master. Runners dart back and forth between the kitchen and the triclinium, ensuring each dish arrives at the perfect temperature, ensuring the illusion is never broken. And though no true vomitorium exists within the villa, the concept of purging speaks to something deeper in the Roman psyche. Rome was a place of insatiable appetite and empire that was always reaching, always conquering, always consuming. It devoured lands, peoples, and resources with the same vigor that its elites devoured their elaborate meals. The myth, though inaccurate in its specifics, touches on a very Roman trait: the profound, driving hunger to experience everything to its absolute fullest, to push every boundary of pleasure, power, and sensation. There are anecdotes, of course, recorded by historians and satirists, that give the myth some poetic grounding. The Emperor Claudius, it is said, was so fond of overindulgence that he often had to be carried from the dining couch. The notoriously gluttonous Emperor Vitellius was said to have held multiple banquets in a single day, moving from one noble's house to another. Nero, too, was known to feast well into the night. His banquets infamous for their combination of exquisite cuisine and shadowed vice. The satirist Juvenal sneered at the bloated habits of the rich, lamenting the moral rot that such excess represented. 1,000 flavors, he wrote with cutting disdain, but only one tongue to shame them all. Yet if the Romans did not build vomitoria to service their feasts, they poured their architectural genius into creating spaces for mass movement and collective magnificence. The Colosseum, the Theatre of Pompey, the Circus Maximus, these were the true temples of Roman consumption, places where tens of thousands gathered to consume spectacle. The architecture itself pulsed with the collective energy of the mob. The vomitoria were the critical, beating heart of this living machine, the conduits through which the city's lifeblood flowed. As the evening's performance in the amphitheatre ends perhaps with the gladiator's hard-won triumph, or the predictable slapstick of a popular comic farce, the crowd surges upward. The vomitoria fill once more, a torrent of humanity flowing through the stone channels. The roar of the arena gives way to the thunder of thousands of footfalls and the cacophony of farewells and excited chatter, and like water draining through expertly carved channels, the people pour out from the belly of the beast into the cool Roman night. So let us walk with them, past the flickering torches held by slaves waiting for their masters, past the painted advertisements on the city walls for the next games. And as we step once more into the relatively quiet streets, we carry with us both the strange truth and the stranger fiction, a tale of mythical chambers and very real appetites, of an empire that knew how to build for the masses and how to feast for the few. Onward we go, for Rome is not done with us yet. The moon now casts a silver sheen upon the cobblestones, a quiet river of light flowing through the sleeping heart of Rome. Our steps, muffled by the night's hush, bring us near the Ludus Magnus, the grand training ground of Rome's gladiators. It is a formidable structure, a smaller Colosseum in its own right, connected by a subterranean passage to the great Flavian amphitheatre itself. Here, the very air hums with a palpable energy, a memory of grit and resolve pressed into the stones. By day this place is a cacophony of effort. The clang of training swords, the heavy, blunt roods rings out, a percussive rhythm against the thud of sandaled feet shifting in the dirt of the central yard. Shouts echo from the lanistae, the trainers. Their voices roar with commands and critiques. You would hear the strained grunts of men pushing their bodies past exhaustion, the rasp of breath, the wet smack of leather on flesh. By night, however, a different soundscape emerges. The corridors, cool and shadowed, whisper with tales of honor, of fear, and of fame earned in blood. Men sit on the edges of their stone bunks, tending to wounds. Their low murmurs a mix of bravado and quiet dread for the next games. But tonight, we explore not the clash of arms, nor the politics of the arena. We seek a subtler tale, one scented with oil, earth, and a strange, almost sacred, mystery. For in Rome, a city that could turn concrete into poetry and law into an empire, even the sweat of a slave could become a holy relic to the Roman public. The gladiator was a living paradox, a walking contradiction that fascinated them endlessly. He was a slave, often a prisoner of war or a condemned criminal, and yet he was elevated to the status of a hero. He was a killer, his hands stained with the blood of his opponents. Yet he was transformed into a matinee idol, his likeness scratched into walls and molded onto lamps. His body was a theatre of strength and suffering, a canvas sculpted not in pristine marble by a master artist, but in living, breathing muscle and the jagged geography of scars. Each hardened sinew, each puckered mark on his skin, told a story of survival, of a dance with death performed for the roaring approval of the masses, and from this raw, visceral appeal emerged a most curious customly bottling and selling. Of that very sweat, yes, dear listener. It sounds like a fable, but the histories of Pliny and others speak of it. It was said that the perspiration of a victorious gladiator, scraped from his skin after a bout, held magical and medicinal properties. This was not some back alley rumor. It was a thriving cottage industry. Vendors, with the keen opportunism that defines commerce in any age, would station themselves outside the amphitheater's exits. After the games concluded and the crowds began to disperse, they would gain access to the gladiators as they were being cleaned. Armed with a stridular curved metal scraper used by athletes and bathers to remove oil and dirt, they would carefully collect the grime and sweat from the warriors' exhausted bodies. This substance, a potent mixture of sweat, dirt from the arena floor, and sometimes even a fleck of blood, was then decanted into small terracotta or glass pots. Women of wealth and status, the very matrons who were publicly expected to embody Roman virtue, sought it not merely for curiosity, but for beauty. This was their secret luxury, a cosmetic more potent than any concocted by a perfumer. Some believed its gritty essence could cure skin blemishes, that the sheer vitality of the fighter could cleanse imperfections. They would mix it into their facial creams, a secret ingredient whispered about among trusted friends. Others, more daringly, wore it as a perfume. Imagine it, a scent not of rosewater or spikenard, but the earthy, animalic fragrance of a man at the peak of his physical prowess, his life force still radiating from him like heat. There were deeper whispers, too, that it stirred passion, igniting desires with the remembered fury of combat still clinging to its scent. To dab a drop onto the neck or wrists was to anoint oneself with a powerful aphrodisiac. In a society obsessed with virtues, the untranslatable concept of manliness, courage, and excellence, what could be more potent than the literal essence of a man who defied death for sport? The gladiator was the ultimate symbol of virility, and possessing a part of him, even his sweat, was a way to channel that power. Let us imagine a young noblewoman, we shall call her Julia, the cherished daughter of a stern patrician who deems the games a vulgar spectacle. She sits in her chamber, the air thick with the scent of cedar wood from her polished furniture and the delicate fragrance of lilies in a vase. She has never attended the games, has never heard the roar of the crowd or seen the sun glint off polished helmet. Yet her maid, a woman with connections in the city's bustling underbelly, brings her treasures from the arena. A scrap of a crimson tunic, supposedly torn from a champion's shoulder, a faded laurel wreath, its leaves brittle with age, and now this. The small clay jar is cool and rough in her hands. She unplugs the tiny stopper. The scent is not foul, as one might expect, but sharp, salty, and deeply earthy. It smells of dust, iron, and something else, something alive and electric. She dabs it gently upon her wrists, her pulse points. Her heart races not from the scent itself, but from the story it contains. She closes her eyes and can almost picture him, a Thracian, perhaps, with a crested helmet and a small, curved sword. She imagines his strength, his focus, the roar of 80,000 people focused on him alone. She hides the jar beneath a pile of fine Cimmerian silks in her dowry chest. It is her secret, a small act of rebellion, a connection to a world of violent, glorious life that is utterly forbidden to her. Now, let us turn our gaze back to the stalls outside the arena. A grizzled vendor, a former legionary with a scar bisecting one eyebrow, hawks his wares with a showman's flair. His voice is a gravelly rasp, honed by years of shouting over crowds. "Sweat of Mars himself," he cries, holding up a tiny vial. To catch the torchlight, taken from the Secutor, Atticus, champion of today's bout, defeated 2 men. A potion of passion and fortune. One touch will make your husband brave and your lover bold. He spins tales for his eager customers. Stories of women who won the hearts of powerful men and merchants who found the courage to close a winning deal. Few question the source. The desire to believe is far stronger than the need for proof. Beside the pots of sweat, he sells other arena memorabilia, sand-stained dark, supposedly with a hero's blood. Splinters of a shattered shield, a lucky tooth knocked from a fighter's jaw. And the gladiators, what did they think of this peculiar trade, this commodification of their very exhaustion? Their reactions were as varied as the men themselves. Some, the hardened veterans who had seen everything, were simply indifferent. It was another strange Roman custom in a city full of them. Their bodies were already the property of their Lanista. What was one more small indignity? Others laughed, finding it absurd that the wealthiest women in Rome would pay a fortune for what they washed off in the baths each evening. It was a joke they shared in the barracks, a source of dark, cynical humor, and a few, perhaps, the ones who had tasted true fame, took a quiet, complex pride in it. They were celebrities. Their names were known across the city. To know that even their suffering could be transformed into a luxury, a coveted object of desire, it was a testament to their power, a strange and twisted form of immortality. They might even cooperate, leaning into the strigal scrape, knowing it added to their mystique. Not all were willing participants. Imagine a newly captured Dacian prince, forced into the ludus. He resists the scraping strigal, seeing it as the ultimate humiliation. His pain, his fear, his very essence is being packaged and sold for profit. For him, it is not fame, but the final stripping away of his identity. Yet others leaned into their fame, playing to the crowd even after the fighting was done, aware that Rome adored its martyrs of the Arano, be they victorious or vanquished. The more popular the gladiator, the more valuable his sweat. The auras of champions like Flamma or Spartacus would have made their perspiration worth more than gold. This practice, strange as it sounds, is but one thread in a larger Roman tapestry, a world where boundaries blurred with a casual and fascinating ease. Here, the sacred and the sensual were not opposites, but neighbors. Violence and veneration walked hand in hand. It is easy for us to marvel at the grand monuments, the aqueducts, the temples, the forums, and the intricate systems of law. But here, in the glint of sweat sold as seduction, we see Rome's true, complicated, and deeply human heart. The amphitheater is quiet now. The great canvas awning, the velarium, has been furled. The sands of the arena floor are swept clean of blood and footprints, ready for the next day of spectacle. The armor is stowed, the weapons locked away, but in the city's wealthiest quarters, in villas perched on the Palatine Hill, candles flicker. Ladies sit before bronze mirrors, examining tiny jars, secrets nestled between ivory combs and pots of expensive Egyptian creams. They dab, they dream, they believe in the magic of a hero's pain, and we, too, as we leave the shadow of the ludus, carry this strangeness with us. We carry a scent, not of lavender or rose, but of dust, courage, and a deep, primal longing. For Rome was never content with mere reality. It had to embellish, to mythologize, to transform even the most bodily of truths into legend. Come now, dear traveler. The night deepens, and the city's pulse slows to a steady, dreaming beat. Our next tale lies beneath the stars, and beside the stones where families gather to dine with the dead. The air cools and clarifies as we walk beyond the city walls. The noise and heat of Rome, that grand and glowing beast of a city, lies behind us now. The rumbling of cartwheels on stone fades, the clamor of a million lives recedes, and a different world opens up. Ahead, just past the sentinel rows of fluted cypress trees and dusty olive groves that border the Appian Way, we come upon a place quieter, softer. This is the necropolis, the city of the dead. But do not imagine a landscape of desolation, dear listener. Banish any thoughts of ghostly moans or crumbling, neglected crypts. This is no place of fear. Instead, there is a curious kind of life here, a gentle and persistent vitality. Listen, in the twilight. You can hear the echoes of laughter, the soft clinking of wine cups, the rustle of woolen blankets being unfurled. On grassy ground, it is the heart of the Parentalia, a sacred 9-day festival held each February in honor of the ancestors. All across the Roman world, from the shores of Britannia to the sands of Syria, families gather at the tombs of their kin to share food, wine, and, most importantly, memory. They do not mourn in silence. They celebrate in story. We pass a family, seated around a raised stone monument, a modest but well-tended tomb. The flickering light of an oil lamp casts their faces in a warm, gentle glow. A mother, her brow furrowed in concentration, unwraps flatbread, still warm from the hearth at home, from a clean linen cloth. A young boy, no more than 7, carefully pours watered wine from a large amphora into a simple ceramic jug. His elder son, a youth on the cusp of manhood, his eyes shaded with thought, places a freshly made garland of violets and rosemary upon the tomb's inscription. Their father, whom we will call Marcus, a respectable craftsman, speaks softly. His voice is a low, comforting murmur against the chirping of the cicadas. He is telling his children tales of their grandfather, not grand histories, but small, perfect moments. He tells them how the old man once saved a neighbor's prized goose from a runaway mule, a story that still makes them chuckle. He describes, with gestures of his work-roughened hands, how his father built the family's first olive press with nothing but timber, ingenuity, and sheer stubbornness. The stories are stitched with humor, with immense pride, and with a gentle, accepting grief that feels more like love than loss. This act, this shared meal at the graveside, is called the refrigerium, a cooling or refreshment. It is meant to refresh the soul of the departed, a sacred act of hospitality offered across the veil between worlds. The Romans believed the spirits of the dead, the manes, continued to exist and required sustenance from the living. Food is sometimes left on plates atop the tomb, but more elaborate graves have a special feature: libation tubes. These are small pipes, made of clay or lead, that lead directly down into the earth, into the burial chamber itself. Through these, the family can pour offerings of wine, honey, or milk, ensuring the nourishment is delivered directly to those who dwell below. It is a profoundly intimate act, a physical connection to the unseen elsewhere. In the deeper twilight, a group of young women sit cross-legged in the soft grass, shaded by a grand mausoleum belonging to a wealthy merchant family. They are weaving floral wreaths, their fingers moving deftly through piles of myrtle, roses, and ivy, while singing a soft, lilting song, perhaps a hymn to Proserpina, queen of the underworld. One of them pauses her work to read aloud a small inscription carved into a nearby stele, her voice clear in the still air. She traces the letters with reverent fingers, to Livia, beloved sister, who bloomed and faded as a spring poppy. Gone but never forgotten. Live for us who can no longer. Not far from them, a baker has brought his apprentices to honor the founder of their guild. They sit on the ground, sharing a simple meal of crumbly sheep's cheese, sun-dried figs, and hard-boiled eggs. They speak of the old man's legendary stubbornness about the correct proofing of bread, and of his unexpected kindness to stray dogs and struggling apprentices. Their conversation is a mixture of trade gossip and fond remembrance. Nearby, a legionary home on leave places a worn gladius, its blade dulled with age and service, at the base of a stone urn containing his father's ashes. For strength, he murmurs to the stone. For memory, he is not praying, not exactly. He is reporting for duty. Not all is solemnity and reverence. The necropolis is a public space, a park for the dead. Children, freed from the confines of their city apartments, dart between tombs, their high-pitched laughter echoing as they play a game of tag. Behind, a large, carved monument depicting scenes from the Trojan War. A pair of young lovers, thinking themselves hidden, steal a kiss. Somewhere in the distance, a flute begins to play a simple, haunting melody, and above it all, the first stars of evening bloom like scattered jasmine, gentle and watching. The Roman view of death was neither wholly mournful nor blissfully serene. It was, above all, practical and familiar. The dead were not exiled to some distant, terrifying realm. They were simply next door. They remained part of the family, part of the community, a presence to be acknowledged, respected, and sometimes even consulted in times of trouble. Graveyards were not hidden away in shame, but were woven into the city's margins, lining the great roads that led into Rome. They were spaces of gathering, not of avoidance. The tombs themselves often bore inscriptions urging the living to make the most of their time. Nan fui, fui. Nan sum, nan kuro, reads one, found on many graves. I was not, I was, I am not, I care not. It is a statement of bold, unflinching acceptance. Another declares, eat, drink, be merry, and come to me when you are ready. One particularly grumpy inscription warns passers-by. Traveller, if you see this monument, do not maliciously piss here. There are watchers. These were not nihilistic outbursts, but powerful reminders of life's fleeting sweetness, written by people who understood mortality intimately. In such surroundings, a young girl named Talia kneels before the small, unadorned tomb of her older brother. He was swept away by a fever just last winter. She has brought him his favorite honey cakes, setting one carefully beside the inscription of his name. In a low whisper, she tells him her secrets, that she has a crush on the boy who delivers their olives, that she broke her mother's favorite dish and blamed the cat. Later, before she leaves, she tuck a tiny, folded papyrus message between the carved letters, a note sealed with beeswax, and a silent hope that he can somehow read it. An old widow, Marcia, her back bent with age, walks slowly along the path, moving from tomb to tomb and nodding to old friends, both living and dead. Her basket is filled with bread, dates and a small jar of olives from her own garden. She shares a crust with a stray dog that has flopped at her feet, then sits on a low stone bench beside her husband's grave. "I'm still here, Lucius," she says aloud, her voice raspy but clear. "You were right about the peach tree. It didn't make it through the frost." She chuckles, a dry, rustling sound. "Stubborn as you were," she brushes a fallen leaf from the cool marble, her touch as gentle as a caress. It is in these simple, profoundly human moments that the past and present embrace. The lines blur. The dead are not truly gone, not entirely. They live on, in bread shed, in wine poured, in stories told and retold until they become family lore. This is the true feast of the parentalia, not just food for the body, but remembrance for the soul. And so we sit, if only for a moment, among them. The air is rich with the scent of thyme, warm earth, and baked bread. The wine is tart on the tongue, the cheese is sharp, the bread simple and good. The sky above is a deep, endless velvet stitched with stars, and the stories flow like the Tiber in springtime, carrying the past into the present. This chapter of Rome's strange beauty teaches us that death need not be a final, terrifying wall. It need not be feared or hidden away. It can be shared with laughter, with food, with songs sung beneath a gentle moon. As the last of the oil lamps are snuffed and the families begin to rise, gathering their baskets and blankets to go, the necropolis returns to its customary quiet. But the warmth remains in hearts, in bellies, and most powerfully, in memory. Come now, dear traveller. Let us return toward the city's distant firelight. There is more strangeness yet ahead, more marvels to be found in the mundane fabric of this incredible city. Next, we shall dine not with the humble dead, but with the decadent living. We will visit the kitchens of the elite, where exotic birds are prepared, their tongues prized above rubies, and where taste is a weapon of status. The grand triclinium awaits us. Welcome back to the heart of Rome, where oil lamps flicker through the mica-paned windows of sprawling villas, and the carefully cultivated laughter of the privileged spills over high garden walls. We find ourselves on the Palatine Hill, a world away from the clamour and grime of the Subura below. Here, the very air seems filtered, perfumed by the blossoms in private gardens and the expensive incense burning on household altars. Within these luxurious homes, the kitchens never truly sleep. Their fires burn day and night, a constant, hungry heart tended by a small army of cooks, slaves, and apprentices, a cog in a vast machine designed to produce feasts fit not just for the stomach, but for the insatiable Roman ego. Tonight, dear traveller, we are granted a rare glimpse into one such kitchen, a bustling, vaulted chamber nestled deep within the domus of a senator known as Gaius Petronius Falco. His tastes are as legendary as his spiraling debts, and though the austere ideals of the old republic are a distant memory, his table still groans with an ambition that is nothing short of imperial. Falco understands that in this new Rome, power is not merely won on the battlefield or in the Senate House. It is displayed on the dinner plate, flaunted in the vintage of the wine, and whispered about in the days following a truly spectacular banquet. The air in his kitchen is a thick, intoxicating tapestry of scents, the woody perfume of rosemary, and the earthy notes of coriander, the sharp, clean burst of citrus from Sicilian lemons, and the rich, fermented sweetness of Falernian wine simmering in a pot. These fragrances are all woven through with the sharper, more primal bite of charcoal. smoke, and the caramelizing sweetness of figs and dates roasting alongside a suckling pig. You can smell money here, the aroma of a global supply chain converging in a single, heated room. Here, under the watchful eye of the head cook, or archimagirus, meals are not mere sustenance. They are alchemy, theatre, and political statement. Status is built, and rivals are humbled, with every bite at the very center of this controlled chaos. Upon a magnificent bronze platter, chased with images of Bacchus and his satyrs, lies the evening's peace, the resistance, the tongues of flamingos, yes, flamingo. Tongues? You heard correctly. Pale pink, no bigger than a man's thumb. They have been painstakingly prepared. First, boiled to a state of impossible tenderness, then peeled and seasoned with a complex mixture of sharp vinegar, golden hymettus, honey, and a generous splash of garum sociorum, the finest grade of the fermented fish sauce, so beloved of Roman palates, a condiment more valuable than perfume. To the Roman elite, a simple equation governs all taste. The rarer the ingredient, the greater the prestige. And what, they reason, could be rarer than the soft, slender, delicate tongue of a majestic, exotic bird, captured near the salt lakes of Egypt or Numidia, and shipped across the vast Mediterranean. A slave boy, no more than 13, is tasked with the final presentation. His name is Lycorus, and he was captured in a raid on a Thracian village 2 years ago. He works silently, his brow gleaming with sweat under the intense heat of the ovens. With a pair of bronze tweezers, he carefully arranges the tongues in an elegant spiral pattern, each one nestled beside a jewel-like garnish of glistening pomegranate seeds and the dark green of freshly torn mint. His hands must be steady, his focus absolute. His master, Folco, is a man of volatile moods, known to dismiss a cook or order a lashing for the slightest imperfection, especially when the presentation falls short of what he deems divine. Does not think of the strange birds, nor of the waste. He thinks only of the pattern, of the senator's looming presence, of the stinging pain of the rod. Nearby, a small culinary world is in motion. An older cook, a grizzled specialist from Gaul with tattoos still faintly visible on his forearms, is basting a peacock. The bird will be roasted, then, once cooled, redressed in its own iridescent feathers, to be presented as if it were still alive. Another man, a Sicilian famed for his work with pastry, is sculpting dormice. They have been fattened on a diet of walnuts and chestnuts, then baked and stuffed with a savory mince of pork and spices. Now, he carefully places them onto tiny chariots made of baked bread, to be served on a bed of lentils, representing the sands of the Circus Maximus. It is a scene of profound absurdity, of surreal artistry, and yet it is entirely, quintessentially Roman. Out in the triclinium, the dining room, the guests recline on 3 large couches arranged in a U-shape. The frescoes on the walls depict scenes from Ovid's Metamorphoses, lithely painted figures caught in moments of divine transformation. The air hums with conversation and the clinking of silver cups. There are senators here, their togas immaculately white, poets hoping for patronage, and merchants, their hands softened by coin-counting rather than labor, eager to rub shoulders with the aristocracy. They speak of the new grain shipments from Alexandria and the rising taxes on marble from Carrara. They trade gossip, their voices lowered, about a praetor's wife and her affair with a gladiator, a scandal whispered in the steam of the public baths. And then a hush falls as 2 slaves, moving in perfect synchrony, bring forth the flamingo. Tongues, they murmur in collective awe. It is the sound of practiced appreciation, some feigned modest surprise, as if they were not all jaded connoisseurs of the exotic. Others, like the corpulent merchant Marcus Livius, lean forward, their eyes shining with a greedy, undisguised anticipation for the first taste. One guester visiting envoy from Alexandria, a man of quiet dignity in linen robes, smiles with an expression of amused disdain. He leans toward his neighbor and says, just loud enough to be heard, "In Alexandria, where these birds crowd the shores of the lake, we feed them to the cats." His comment hangs in the air for a moment, a sliver of foreign reason in a room dedicated to glorious excess, before being swallowed by a fresh wave of praise for the host. But here, in the heart of the empire, they are treasure. They are not just food, they are a narrative of power. Each tongue whispers a story of the vast reach of Rome's legions, the dominance of her merchant fleets, the sheer world-bending force of Roman will. Gaius Falco, his face flushed with wine and pride, raises his silver cup. To Rome, he proclaims, his voice booming in the chamber, where we do not just rule the world, we taste it. And they toast, their voices joining his, and they eat. A young poet named Sabina, seated at the far end of the lowest couch, watches it all, her eyes wide with a mixture of fascination and revulsion. She has been invited for novelty, a clever, pretty face to perform a verse later in the evening. She comes from a respectable but modest equestrian family, and has never seen such calculated decadence up close. As she watches a senator pop a whole tongue into his mouth with a sigh of pleasure, she wonders how many vibrant, long-legged birds it took to fill that one silver plate. She pictures a mountain of beautiful, discarded bodies, all for this fleeting moment of gustatory one-upmanship. These are the stark paradoxes of Rome's elite cuisine. It is at once elegant and grotesque, a thing of refined beauty built upon a foundation of staggering extravagance, of unseen labor, of conquest. The flamingo tongue, in this moment, becomes a potent symbol of everything Rome desires and everything it is: rarity, control, spectacle, and a profound gnawing hunger for more beyond the villa's guarded walls, down in the crowded, noisy insulae, where the city's artisans and laborers live. Meals are a different affair entirely. Here, a family gathers around a simple wooden table. Their dinner consists of coarse bread, a wedge of hard sheep's cheese, a handful of briny olives, and perhaps a hearty stew of lentils or chickpeas, flavored with a bit of onion and garlic. A fish caught that morning from the murky Tiber is a cause for celebration. They eat with their hands, with a gratitude born of necessity, not with the languid flourish of the wealthy. And yet, even the poor are inextricably part of this vast gastronomic empire. They cannot afford flamingo tongues, but they purchase watered-down garum from market stalls to season their food. They save for a pinch of pepper or a stick of cinnamon, scraps of the same imported spices that perfume Falco's kitchen. They stand in the forum and listen to heralds describe the latest triumphs in distant lands. News that means the markets might soon have a new, strange delicacy. They dream, perhaps, not of power, but of one day tasting the foods of emperors, of knowing for a moment what it is to live at the center of the world. Meanwhile, back in the market stalls of the Emporium near the river, a trader named Scipio counts his coins by the light of a single lamp. He is a man who understands the city's appetites. He has sold goose livers, specially fattened to an unnatural size, ostrich eggs from the southern deserts, and spiny sea urchins kept alive in barrels of seawater. He knows which Domos craves novelty and which prefers the comforting nostalgia of old Republican dishes. He knows which houses will pay any price for what he calls the murmur of envy, that special ingredient, that something no guest has ever tasted. Back at Folco's villa, the plates are cleared. The feast is far from over. The guests move on to the second course, and then the dessert. Candied violets, honey-drenched cakes studded with pine nuts, and bowls of sweet wine mixed with pepper, and chilled with snow brought down from the mountains. And finally, when the guests are heavy with food and drink, Sabina is called forth. She stands, her heart pounding, and recites her poema, clever satire, veiled just enough in mythological metaphor to mock the gluttony and excess around her. Without causing direct offense, it is met with delighted laughter and scattered applause. They appreciate the wit, even if they miss the full sting of its critique. Gaius Falco, immensely pleased with himself and his successful evening, tosses her a heavy gold coin. "Brilliant, my dear. A fine performance," he slurs. "Next time, bring a verse for giraffe meat. I'm having 1 cent from Marsilia." Sabina bows gracefully. She catches the coin, its weight a cold, hard reality in her palm. And as she steps outside into the cooler night air, leaving the cloying warmth and noise behind, she cannot help but wonder, will Rome ever be full? Or is its destiny to devour the world until there is nothing left? This chapter, dear listener, shows us the true hunger of an empire. It is not merely a hunger for food, but for wonder, for power, for the very act of possession. It reveals how even the most insignificant part of a creature, the tongue of a strange bird, once an afterthought of nature, can be transformed into an object of intense obsession. So we leave the feast behind, our steps lighter on the cobblestones, but our hearts heavy with thought. What do we consume, and what, in the end, does it consume in return? The stars watch silently as we walk on, the sounds of the banquet fading behind us. We head toward our next Taylor story of a different kind of fire, a sacred flame kept alive by those sworn to silence, to purity, and to a unique and terrible peril. Let us continue. Asterisk. Beyond the roar of feasts and the murmurs of markets, beyond the grand spectacles of the Colosseum and the political machinations of the Senate, lies a quieter, more profound sanctum. We walk now beneath the vast shadow of the Forum, our footsteps echoing where Caesars and commoners have walked for centuries. We pass the Senate steps, still resonating with the ghosts of Cicero's orations, and turn toward the ancient, sacred heart of the city. Here, enclosed within a walled compound filled with the dark, glossy leaves of sacred laurel trees and the cool elegance of marble porticos, live the most enigmatic and revered women in all of Rome, the Vestal Virgins, sworn to 30 years of chastity and chosen in girlhood from the daughters of the patrician elite. These 6 priestesses serve the goddess Vesta, the serene and powerful guardian of the hearth and home. Their central duty is, on the surface, simple, yet it is a task of immense and terrifying symbolic weight to keep the eternal flame burning within her temple. This is no ordinary fire. It is the ignis eternus, a flame that symbolizes the very soul, the enduring life force of Rome itself. Should it ever go out, it is an omen of the most catastrophic kind, signaling the gods' abandonment and the imminent fall of the empire. The house of the Vestals, the Atrium Vesta, is an oasis of profound serenity. Birds flit between the vine columns of its 2-story portico. A gentle fountain, carved in the shape of water nymphs, murmurs in the central courtyard, its sound a constant, soothing presence. Statues of former chief Vestals, the Vestals Maximae, line the colonnades, their stone faces serene and impassive, a silent lineage of devotion. And within these peaceful, hallowed confines, 6 women live a life that is at once deeply revered and severely restricted. We meet one such priestess as dawn breaks over the city. Her name is Claudia. She is 17, chosen for this life when she was just 7 years old. She has eyes the color of polished bronze and a posture shaped not by vanity, but by years of solemn ritual. She rises before the first light to perform her sacred duty, her steps soft on the ancient mosaic tiles of the temple floor. The air is cool and smells of cold stone, old incense, and the faint perfume of night-blooming jasmine from the garden. She chants the ancient invocations, words passed down for 1,000 years, her voice a clear, steady whisper in the vast quiet of the Roman morning. For 30 years she will serve Vesta, 10 years as a novice, learning the intricate rites, 10 years as a performing priestess, tending the flame and officiating ceremonies, and a final 10 years as a teacher, passing her sacred knowledge to the next generation. During this entire time, she may not marry, she may not lie with a man, she may not even express romantic longing, for her virginity is not merely a personal state. It is a political and spiritual necessity, a sacred shield believed to ensure the safety, prosperity, and continued favor of the gods for the entire empire. Yet within these hallowed walls, the Vestals are far from powerless. They hold a legal and social status greater than almost any other woman in Rome. They are not under the legal control of their fathers or any man. They answer only to the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome. They are trusted guardians of sacred objects and also of the last wills and testaments of emperors and powerful senators. They are called upon to be judges in certain legal matters, their word considered incorruptible. A Vestal possesses a unique power. She may free a condemned prisoner with a single, deliberate touch if she crosses his path by chance. Her very presence grants protection. Her word carries the weight of divine authority. But the price for this power, for this reverence, is steep and terrifyingly absolute. Should a Vestal break her sacred vow of chastity, the punishment is one of Rome's darkest rituals. Because her blood is sacrosanct and cannot be spilled, she cannot be executed by normal means. Instead, she is taken in a closed litter in complete silence to a place just inside the city walls known as the Campus Celeratus, the field of wickedness. There, an underground chamber has been prepared. She is dressed in her grave clothes, and with a single oil lamp, a small loaf of bread, a pitcher of water, and a simple bed, she is lowered into the earth. The entrance is then sealed, and she is buried alive. Rome, having not directly killed her, absolves itself of sacrilege. She is left to her fate, entombed in darkness beneath the city she was sworn to protect. There are whispered tales, of course, passed down from one generation of novices to the next, stories of love in the shadows of the temple garden, of doomed trysts with handsome young nobles, of desperate choices and their horrific consequences. Yet the vast majority of Vestals serve with a profound and quiet dignity, embracing the calm rhythm of devotion and the unique sisterhood of their station. Claudia walks through the great hall of the Atrium Vesta, her fingers brushing lightly across the carved images of the past Vestals whose statues line the walls. She sees their names etched in stone ochre, Unia, Flavia, their deeds immortalized. She knows that in this sacred stillness she is both a prisoner and a queen, tethered to this flame yet uplifted by its eternal light. She is part of an unbroken chain stretching back to the city's mythical founding. Visitors come to the temple of Vesta daily, seeking blessings. They are not permitted inside the inner sanctum where the fire burns, but they may approach the entrance. They leave offerings of small, sweet cakes, flasks of fine oil, and bouquets of flowers. A farmer, his face weathered by the sun, brings a clutch of white doves in a wicker cage, a prayer for a good harvest. A young mother, her eyes filled with hope, lays down her baby's first swaddling cloth, praying for the child's protection from illness. The sacred flame flickers just out of sight, behind a golden gate, its light dancing on the marble, never wavering, never dimming. In the long afternoons and quiet evenings, the vestals read from scrolls of history and philosophy. They embroider intricate tapestries depicting the deeds of the gods, or they walk the colonnades, their white robes trailing silently behind them. Their world is circumscribed, yet it is far from empty. Deep friendships, forged in shared duty and isolation, bloom quietly here. Jokes are whispered behind cupped hands. Sympathies are exchanged with a simple glance. A gift left in a sister's chamber, pressed flower from the garden, a small, hand-copied poem speaks of bonds that run deeper than any spoken vow. And when the emperor himself visits, he does so not as a ruler, but as a supplicant. He enters their precinct with his head bowed, his usual Praetorian guard waiting respectfully outside the sacred boundary. Even he, the master of the world, must stand in their presence without condescension. He might ask for a blessing before a military campaign or entrust his personal will to their keeping. For he knows these are not mere maidens, they are the soul keepers of his empire. At major festivals, like the Vestalia in June, the Vestals take part in grand public processions. They are carried through the city in litters, and the crowds part before them, cheering and throwing flowers. The priestesses move like living statues, serene and pale in their white linen robes and woolen fillets, their faces impassive masks of sanctity as the Roman sun catches the gold threads in their garments. They are symbols made flesh, living, embodiments of Rome's purity and piety. And yet, for all the reverence, they are still human. Claudia, in a quiet moment, sometimes gazes over the high garden wall at the city below. She sees couples strolling hand in hand, hears the laughter of children playing, and feels a pang of a life she will never know. She wonders, quietly, what it would be like to be anonymous, to be free, to love and be loved in that simple, mortal way. But then, a breeze will stir the leaves of the sacred laurel trees, or the scent of incense will drift from the temple, and she will turn back to her sacred hearth, steadying her breath, steadying her purpose. The feeling passes, a ghost of a different life, and she is, once again, Claudia, priestess of Vesta. What is freedom? Is it the right to choose your own path, or the honor of having a great purpose chosen for you? What is sacrifice? Is it what is taken from you, or what you willingly give to something larger than yourself? These are the questions that stir even in the profound stillness of sanctity. The Vestal Virgins teach us of the great paradoxes that lie at Rome's court, the intricate blending of purity and power, of silence and significance, of profound restriction and unparalleled honor. They remind us that history's most powerful currents are often held not in the loud triumphs of armies, but in the quiet, steady hands of those who tend the flame. Tonight, the stars shimmer over the temple roof, a vast and silent audience too. The cities slumber. Inside, Claudia lights her personal night lamp, its small flame a humble echo of the eternal one she guards. She checks the sacred fire one last time, ensuring it burns brightly against the coming darkness, and kneels once more before it. Her shadow, cast by the immortal light, dances on the ancient walls like a memory, a living part of Rome's long and layered story. And we, dear listener, step softly away, humbled by this display of quiet, enduring strength. Rome slumbers all around us, a city of 1,000,000 souls dreaming of conquest, love, and survival. But its flame, thanks to these women, endures as dawn brushes its rosy fingers over Rome's rooftops. We find ourselves in the bustling Subura district, where streets are narrow, busy, and alive with earthy purpose. The air is a symphony of city life awakening. The scent of fresh bread, yeasty and warm, drifts from communal ovens where housewives share gossip and a morning fire. Children, barefoot and bold, chatter in doorways, their high-pitched laughter a counterpoint to the low rumble of iron-rimmed carts on ancient flagstones. From a nearby workshop, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer on an anvil marks the steady, metallic heartbeat of another Roman day. But follow your nose, dear listener, past the scent of baking and hot iron, down an alley perpetually damp with morning dew and runoff from the upper floors. Here, a different perfume asserts itself, cutting through the pleasantries of the morning with an almost physical force, sharp, acrid, unmistakably human. It is the biting scent of ammonia, a smell that wrinkles the nose and waters the eyes. We are entering a Phalonica, a Roman laundry, the unsung engine of the city's hygiene. Here, in these humming, odoriferous workshops, garments stained by the city's ubiquitous dust, spattered with wine from last night's feast, or darkened by the sweat of honest labor, are revived by hands well practiced in the alchemy of cleanliness. The process is vigorous, a testament to human endurance. The labor is grueling, a daily battle against filth, and the most vital, most surprising ingredient, urine, yes indeed, human urine. It is Rome's greatest degreaser, a gift of biology, rich in the ammonia that so effectively breaks down oils and stubborn stains. This potent liquid was a valuable commodity, collected from public urinals, often large terracotta jars known as dolia, placed discreetly or not so discreetly at street corners for the convenience of passers-by. Once full, these jars would be emptied by the fuller's apprentices, the contents delivered in sloshing, heavy buckets to the laundries. The trade was so lucrative and widespread that the Emperor Vespasian, ever the pragmatist, imposed a tax upon it. When his own son, Titus, expressed disgust at the source of this new revenue, Vespasian is said to have held a gold coin under his nose and uttered the infamous phrase, "Pecunia non alet, money does not stink." A lesson in fiscal reality, echoing down through the ages from the smelly heart of Rome. Inside the Phalonica, the air is thick and steamy, a humid fog of labor. A series of great stone tubs, or lacunae, are set into the floor, each filled with a murky, churning concoction of water, clay, and aged urine. In these vats, workers, mostly slaves or freedmen seeking a hard but steady wage, stomp the garments barefoot, their legs bare to the thigh. They tread the cloth with a steady, practiced rhythm, like vintners pressing grapes in a harvest festival. Only here the harvest is grime. With each powerful step, the fabric yields its filth, turning the water into a grey-brown slurry. The air is undeniably pungent, a challenging assault on the senses, but it is not a place of misery. The easy laughter of the workers, sharing a joke or a piece of local news, softens the harsh edge of the atmosphere. We meet Julia, a laundress in her late 30s, with arms corded and strong from years of wringing and pounding cloth. Her feet, perpetually wet, are calloused and tough as leather. Her simple tunic patched in several places, but her eyes shine with an indomitable mirth. She sings as she works, her voice rising above the sloshing and stomping a bawdy tune about a foolish soldier and a clever barmaid, a song learned from her mother, who worked these same vats before her. She sees us watching and pauses, pushing a stray lock of damp hair from her forehead. Better the stink of work than the silence of hunger, she says with a knowing wink, before resuming her rhythmic tread. Nearby, a boy of 12 named Marcus hauls 2 heavy wooden buckets from the street, his young face set in a mask of concentration. His job is to empty the collection jars from the nearby intersection, a task few would envy. The stench clings to his clothes and hair, yet he carries himself with a sort of stoic pride. This work feeds his 2 younger sisters, buys the daily loaf of bread, and earns him the grudging respect of his elders. He is a provider. He carefully tips the contents of a bucket into a large holding tank, his movements economical, avoiding any splash. He has learned the hard way that this is a liquid you do not want on your skin. Once the initial foul washing is complete, the true craft begins. The cleaned garments are transferred to separate basins for rinsing. Clean water, channeled from a nearby aqueduct, rushes in, washing away the grime and the last of the ammonia. Then they are treated with fuller's earther, fine, chalky, pale clay that looks like dust but possesses a remarkable ability to absorb any remaining oils and brighten the fabric's color. The workers knead this clay into the wet cloth, turning the garments a ghostly white. After another rinse, the clothes are beaten on large smooth stones to force out the last of the water and impurities. The sharp slapping sound is a constant percussion in the falonica. Finally, the garments are hung to dry, not on simple lines, but on large, dome-shaped wicker frames called vimania. These frames stretch the cloth, preventing shrinkage and ensuring it dries without wrinkles. In the courtyard, we see rows of these frames, draped with tunics fluttering like the sails of a becalmed fleet, caught in a gentle breeze. Togas, the very symbol of Roman citizenship, are stretched with particular care, their vast swathes of wool arranged to ensure their formal folds will fall with precision and gravitas. Every pleat is a mark of status, every clean hem a whisper of dignity. Restored clients are a cross-section of Roman society, from senators to soldiers, matrons to merchants. Some send a household slave with a basket of laundry and precise instructions. Others arrive themselves, inspecting the finished work, haggling over prices, and sharing jokes with the staff. For all the odors and the mess, the Falonica is a social hub, a place of constant humming exchange. A poet, his robes stained with the ink of a hastily written verse, might come to have the evidence of his inspiration washed away. A widow, preparing her finest dark stola for a dusty funeral procession down the Appian Way, entrusts it to the fuller's care. A new bride, her heart full of hope, might bring her wedding tunic, anxious for the whitening that will make it worthy of the gods. Fullers are not mere laborers. They are craftsmen, their skills respected and sought after. They have secrets to their trade. Mixing fragrant herbs into the final rinse water to combat the lingering smell of the wash lavender and rosemary are common. But for a wealthy client, they might use expensive imported spices to leave a subtle, exotic scent. They craft their own soaps from tallow and ash, shaping the rough blocks like loaves of bread. Their hands are always red and chapped from the caustic liquids, their nails cracked and stained, but their touch is trusted. Even the gods are invoked in this humble enterprise. In a corner of this Phalonica, away from the splash and stomp, a small shrine built into the wall bears offerings to Minerva, goddess of crafts and wisdom, and to Hercules, whose strength the workers hope to emulate. A faded red ribbon, a prayer for luck, hangs from a small, carved head. A small, slightly stale cake lies near a smoking terracotta lamp, a simple gift to win divine favor. Julia tells us that on festival days they wash not only clothes, but the walls, the tools, and themselves. A ritual of purification. Clean hands, clean hearts, she says, her voice earnest as she scrubs a senator's purple-bordered tunic with a rhythmic, practiced grace. Despite the smell, there is an undeniable pride here. A clean garment means respect in a city where appearances matter immensely. A toga bleached to a brilliant white might help a young lawyer win a case in the forum, charm a powerful patron, or impress a potential father-in-law. The fullers, standing ankle-deep in their suds, know their place in this intricate social cycle. They are the polishers of Rome's image. Rome, for all its marble splendor and imperial might, is held together by such unseen, unsung work. Sweat behind the marble, the labor beneath the lace, the stench that precedes the perfume. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, the Phalonica only grows busier. Buckets slosh, cloth snaps in the breeze. The city lives, breathes, and gets dirty, and here it is made clean again. And we, dear traveler, step once more into the street, our clothes and hair scented faintly now, not with ammonia, but with lye and lavender, a complex perfume of labor. It is a reminder that even in the oddest and most pungent of customs, there lies a certain practical beauty. Next, we follow not the scent of soap, but the charm of laughter and luck toward wind chimes shaped like phalluses and the curious Roman art of warding off evil. Asterisk, we find ourselves now on a sun-drenched Roman street, its flagstones worn smooth by the ceaseless passing of sandals and time. The city bustles with its familiar, chaotic rhythms, merchants hawking their wares, invoices made rough by the morning's work, their tables piled high with glistening olives, fat figs, and wheels of sharp sheep's cheese. Bakers, their faces dusted with flour, slide long-handled paddles into fiery ovens, pulling out loaves of bread that scent the air with their crusty promise. The chatter of children playing games of knucklebones in a shaded portico weaves through it all like birdsong. Yet among the markets and mosaics, among the solemn temples and raucous taverns, something unusual catches our eye. It swings gently from the lintel of a doorway, a bronze wind chime, glinting in the Italian sun. It is crafted in the unmistakable shape of a phallus, complete with a pair of tiny, feathered wings and 3 small bells that tinkle a cheerful, metallic tune in the breeze. This, dear listener, is no vulgar joke, no crude adolescent prank. It is a fashionum, a powerful apotropaic charm, an object believed to possess the agency to protect against evil, to deflect the envious gaze, and to guard against all manner of misfortune. And it is everywhere in Rome. Yes, everywhere. Carved in relief on the keystones of archways, painted on the frescoed walls of taverns and wine shops, hanging from the necks of soldiers and even small children, embroidered into the hems of military, tunics forged into the very fabric of household objects, even carried aloft in sacred processions, revered as a holy relic. In Rome, the phallus was not hidden or whispered about. In Sham it was displayed openly, celebrated with humor, sanctified by religion and deeply, profoundly respected as a source of power. In Roman belief, the phallus was a vibrant symbol of vitality, of the generative life force that animated the world, of fertility for fields and families, and most importantly, of active, aggressive protection. The Romans held a deep and abiding fear of the malocchio, the evil eye, the belief that a harmful glance, born of envy or spite, could inflict real-world disaster, sickness, financial ruin, a stillborn child. The fascinum, with its shameless, assertive boldness and its inherent humor, was thought to be the perfect defense. It met a hostile gaze with a shocking, comical, and potent one of its own. Neutralizing the threat before it could do harm, we approach a street vendor named Publius. A man with a weathered face and clever eyes, his cart a treasure trove of protective charms. His small wooden table glitters with a jumble of carved amulets in bone and jet, small bronze figures of household gods, and rings set with grotesque, laughing faces meant to scare away spirits. "Good luck for your newborn," he says to a young mother, his voice a gravelly rasp. He hands her a bulla, a locket containing a tiny phallic charm to be worn until the child comes of age. "Protection for your door," he tells a stern-faced man building a new home, pointing to a particularly elaborate wind chime shaped like a winged phallus with lion's claws, a veritable beast of a guardian. Children playing nearby giggle at the strange shapes, but their parents nod seriously, carefully counting out their coins. These are not trifles or tourist souvenirs. They are essential tools for navigating a world perceived to be fraught with invisible dangers, part of the Roman way of balancing power and protection, reverence and ribaldry. We wander further and find graffiti scrawled on the stucco wall of a tavern, a large, crudely drawn phallus pointing directly toward the entrance, accompanied by the cheerfully scrawled phrase, "Hic habitaci felicitas," "Here lives happiness." Inside, the tavern is warm and dim, filled with the comforting scent of a thick, savory lentil stew, steaming with garlic and herbs, and the loud, unrestrained laughter of its patrons. Lucilla, the innkeeper, a woman with broad shoulders and a welcoming smile, gestures toward the drawing on the outer wall with a smirk. "They say it keeps thieves and bad luck away," she says, wiping the counter with a damp cloth before refilling a customer's terracotta cup. "But I think it's really the stew that keeps them coming back." Even in Pompeii, that city frozen in an eternal moment of sorrow by the ash of Vesuvius, phallic symbols abound. They grace the streets as paving stones. They are carved above thresholds. They even decorate the ovens in bakeries, a prayer for the daily bread to rise. One famous and remarkably preserved example shows a phallus perched like a weather vane on a rooftop, pointing the way not to the wind's direction, but as a compass of good fortune for the entire neighborhood. This casual openness might surprise the modern visitor, accustomed as we are to centuries of modesty and euphemism. But for the Romans, sexuality and its symbols were not shameful. They were natural, sacred, often humorous, and an integral part of life's fabric. The divine and the obscene, the sacred and the profane, lived comfortably side by side, often within the very same object. Priapus, the minor but exceedingly popular god most associated with the phallus, was both a solemn protector and a kind of divine jester. Gardens and orchards bore his statues, ruddy-faced, with a mischievous grin, eternally and comically aroused, wielding his oversized member like a club to warn off intruders. Offerings were left at his feet, the first fruits of a harvest, a garland of flowers, a small cup of wine. His presence was a clear warning to thieves and a potent blessing for the crops. In one well-known poem, the statue of Priapus himself threatens to punish any trespasser, male or female, with a most personal and graphic assaulter, warning clearly, meant to amuse with its shocking crudeness as much as to deter. Romans laughed at the rustic god's bluster, but they also listened. In a city of dark alleys and whispered rumors, protection came in many forms, laughter being one of the most powerful. We pause at the grand home of a wealthy craftsman, where a beautiful mosaic above the threshold depicts Mercury, god of commerce and messengers, holding a purse overflowing with coins in one hand and a phallus in the other. The message is clear and unapologetic. May financial fortune and the fertile power to create and multiply bless this house. Elsewhere, we see these symbols integrated into daily life with startling creativity. We see phallic oil lamps, where the flame would emerge from the tip. We see coins stamped with them, and pottery decorated with grinning, ithyphallic figures. A legionary, taking a break from his patrol, sharpens his gladius on a whetstone. A small, carved bone fashionum dangling from his wrist next to his military insignia. For luck in the fight, he says with a gruff nod, and for my wife. If I return, a small girl wears a tiny pendant around her neck. A bulla shaped like a hand, making a fist with the thumb thrust between the index and middle fingers, a sign called the manu fica, or fig hand, another ancient gesture meant to ward off the evil eye. Her grandmother, seeing her fuss with it, reaches out to touch it gently and mutters a quiet blessing. These symbols, scattered so liberally through everyday life, speak of a people unafraid of the body, of laughter, of desire, of mortality. The phallus, with its bold shape and eternal, generative grin, is not merely a joke, it is a talisman. It is a defiant celebration of life in the face of a hostile world, a reminder that even in the face of an uncertain fate, one might still smile as the sun begins to dip low, casting long dramatic shadows across the city. We find ourselves at the edge of the forum, here tucked into a niche in a high wall. A tiny shrine glows with the light of a flickering lamp and the hope of its supplicants. A loaf of bread, a cup of wine, a small, crudely carved wooden figure, all left by a trembling, hopeful hand. A woman kneels on the hard stones, her head bowed, whispering a prayer. Perhaps for her child's safety on a perilous journey. Perhaps for luck in a lawsuit to be heard tomorrow. Perhaps for a reason so deep and personal she cannot give it a name. Above her, a bronze, winged phallus swings in the evening breeze, its tiny bells catching the dying light with a faint, hopeful chime. And we, dear traveller, look up with her, sharing in the quiet moment. Rome was many things, cruel and glorious, pious and profane, sacred and strange, but above all and in all things, it was human. And in the soft clinking of lucky charms, and the shared warmth of a belief that could make you both laugh and feel safe, we can hear its heart still beating. The journey draws to a close. The lamps are lit across the 7 hills. The city hums with its nightly chorus of dreams and distant songs. Let us walk, one last time, through its winding, history-haunted streets. ... And so, dear listener, our lantern dims, and the ancient streets begin to blur in twilight's embrace. We have wandered far together through kitchens and latrines, banquets and bathhouses, sacred shrines and shadowed alleys. We have feasted, laughed, marveled, and mourned. And now, as the moon rises over the Tiber, we pause to say goodbye. Rome was a world of contradictions. It was brutal and beautiful, excessive and ingenious, vulgar and divine. Its people lived with a vitality that echoes across millennia, only in stone and scroll, but in bread broken by tombs, in sponges rinsed in vinegar, in charms worn close to the skin. As we travelled, we met the hands that shaped this world, a cook arranging dormice with care, a laundress stomping cloth into lather, a vestal whispering prayers to flame. We met a child offering figs to her grandfather's ghost, a poet wooing silence with verses, a soldier kissing a carved charm before marching to war. These were not just stories, they were lives, real, pulsing, flawed and radiant. History, too, often draped in marble, comes alive in these daily rhythms, in the strangeness that now stirs wonder, and in the humanity that still mirrors our own. For what is Rome, if not a reflection of us? Our fears and hopes, our hunger for beauty and safety, our laughter, even in the face of sorrow. In their rituals, we see our own. In their follies, our warnings. In their joy, our inheritance. The eternal city is not merely a place on the map, it is a story told again and again, reshaped by every voice that walks its paths. And tonight, yours has joined that chorus. By listening, by imagining, you have breathed life into the ruins. So take with you what you will, a recipe, a charm, a whispered Latin blessing. Let it remind you that even the oddest traditions were once sacred, that the past, like a well-tended hearth, still warms us. And should you find yourself wandering some day through a museum, a dusty book, or perhaps among the olive groves of Lazio, may a flicker of this tale return to you. May it offer you a smile, a spark, or a moment of connection. If this journey brought you comfort or curiosity, I warmly invite you to subscribe and return again. There are countless stories yet to share, gentle, strange, and beautiful. We end, not with silence, but with a blessing. One the Romans might have offered to travelers departing their threshold. May your journey be fortunate and light. Until next time. Dear friend, thank you for walking beside me. Good night and farewell.